In the shadows where the truth hides deep, echoes of the lost and the secrets they keep. Cold cases burn in the back of your mind. We dig through the dark, one clue at a time. This ain't fiction, this is blood, this is truth. 12-gauge investigative, justice uncaged. We ask the questions they're too scared to say, shining a light where the guilty pray from killers to
This is
whispers.
12-gauge investigative. Let's jump in.
We're built for the case. Just getting started. Justice is just getting started. 12-gauge investigative. We don't miss.
All right, all right, all right. How's everybody doing on this Friday evening? I hope everybody's doing okay. If this is your first time to my channel, welcome. My name is 12 Gauge, and this is my channel, 12 Gauge Investigative. You know, I did the first part of this psychological breakdown on deception of a killer this morning, and I was just kind of curious about, some of the things that I had done before prior. And I wanted to bring back a little bit more information to complete and finish the outtakes of what I was intending to start this morning. I just it just took too long, and I thought I'll just come back and finish it up later, and that's what I'm doing right now. So just feel free to come on in and hit the like button if you enjoy what I do, and become a subscriber if it's something that you feel that you'll enjoy from the channel. I left off with identification of how I perceive Brian being as a person versus what he's been portrayed in society and in the media and even on YouTube, because people can perceive one thing just based on little bitty attributes. And what we saw at the Dateline episode the other night, is that he supposedly did speak to somebody at that pool party, and he was able to contact that person back. But the contact that he had with that individual never went returned on her end. So you have to ask yourself, what was it that caused that person not to respond? Sorry, I had the wrong one up. What would have been for that person not to respond back to him? What would have caused her to feel so, not really threatened, just to feel so uninterested after giving him her number? So I asked that question tonight, and I've been asking that question to myself for a while. But I want to continue going because I have plenty of stuff to talk about tonight. So let's start with the continuum of what I was discussing this morning. So I'm going to have to kind of step away so that I can see this in another window versus looking at it. So if I don't see you in the chat, please do understand that I am glad that you are here. I left off with this part right here where I said, he would just really quiet and really intense, staring. He made me uncomfortable, and I put definitely noticeable boundary issues, control, and lack of empathy. So whenever somebody is really quiet and really intense, there's a persona that they give off to you pertaining to how they view their environment. Well, all this is based on my personal opinion and based on some of the clientele that I've worked with in my time um, regarding these issues. So when somebody has boundary issues, they're going to sit there and stare at you without really understanding that they're breaking your boundaries because they're looking across the room at you. You make contact with them kind of uncomfortable like, and they still keep staring. There's a difference between liking somebody or liking what you see and just blatantly trying to almost intimidate. There's control factor, just like what I just said. And lack of empathy is what we always hear that's associated with this individual. So, lack of empathy states that they don't have any regard on putting themselves in another person's shoes, meaning that they're incapable of understanding that that is a social etiquette that is not sus- um, accepted in society by very many cultures. I mean, in some of them, in some cultures, it's very rude to sit there and make eye contact, kind of like the Asian culture. If you sit there and you make contact with the Asians, a lot of times it's viewed as disrespectful. So you have to be very mindful of who and what you're either making eye contact or whatever. Um, and now I'm going to talk about the warrant. The warrant said that the documents in the vehicle, the paperwork, the books, a prescription, a cell phone, a laptop, and power cables were also collected. So this is the items that were collected out of the vehicle. Um, these were some of the statements that were made about this individual. And as you can tell, perception is a lot of reality, especially when it comes to this case. People's perceptions of whatever this individual is or was seems to be more of a focal point now that we're getting ready for the trial rather than when they were investigating these criminal acts. Um, Bullied loner who overcame addiction, that was a positive, was always asking questions. And there's nothing wrong with that, but think about that statement in itself. If you're always asking questions, is that because you don't understand or is that because you're trying to really gain a perception of what's going on in your reality? Because as I was saying last night, a lot of individuals that have issues with addiction in their past, once they clean up, those issues don't go away. You develop issues with trust, you develop issues with understanding what people are articulating to you. A lot of times your brain has been damaged by the chemicals or by the lifestyle that has even created post acute or post traumatic stress disorder. I don't know why I said acute. Please forgive me. So always asking questions isn't always a bad thing, but you have to ask yourself, was it, we ask questions when we don't understand, but there are people that never ask questions. He was always asking questions. Was he asking it to learn, to clarify, or to get some kind of direction in which he was looking to overcome? He always wanted to fight somebody. And of course, this always means that, like I said last night, whenever you're overcoming a physical attribution to something that has plagued you for a long time, i.e., his weight, his drug addiction, his lack of self esteem, and the areas in his life that were uncontrollable to him. It's almost like you feel disattached, not only to yourself, but you feel disattached to your reality, whatever that might be. He may have felt disattached to his family because maybe he wasn't a high achiever. Maybe his sisters were the high achievers and he was mediocre at best. And he was trying to find his way in this world, which most of us do. And therefore, it led him down some very precarious paths. And in doing so, this created a drug addict. This created an individual who supposedly stole his sister's cell phone and sold it for $400, and who his dad pressed charges against them for that. So he learned at an early age, due to that, that there was nothing the family wouldn't do as far as consequences were concerned. So, drug abuse. If you've ever been impacted by an individual who is a drug addict, either current using or past using, you do understand that they have an inferiority complex based on their own reality of thinking and understanding of where they're going in their life and where they've been. You know, some people are looking for an area in their lives to grow, right? As we all are. But you got to remember this as well. You know, if you have overcame addiction and then all of a sudden you've been flying through the twilight zone for a little while and then all of a sudden the world is clear to you and you've never fit in while you were in your addiction, how are you going to fit in when you're sober? You know what I mean? So, um, that drug abuse is a huge thing. I believe that it caused a lot more damage to his brain than had been um, let on. I believe that, you know, based on my professional opinion, I believe that, you know, we all know that drugs and alcohol and criminal behavior do cause a shift in the brain mentality, and it cause, especially the drugs, they make our mind change its chemical composition. Therefore, we don't think the same, we don't react the same, and we don't articulate our emotions the same as we did before we started. More self destructive in the 12th grade. So at this point, was he at his heightened drug use? Had he lost all that weight? More self destructive means that anytime that you become self destructive to yourself, it means that you lose a sense of caring, a sense of valuing your life, or even seeing yourself as somebody or something that is worth value, that is worth taking care of. So in the 12th grade, supposedly, if he became more self destructive, that would have meant that maybe the drug use became a little more heavy. Maybe he lost touch with reality a little more. And when you do that, you get used to that everyday existence. So like I was saying a while ago, once you sober up, your reality comes back to you. And if you've never learned how to live with the coping skills of that reality, what ends up happening is you struggle. And sometimes you crash and burn and you give up because you say, well, it was easier being high all the time. It was easier going through life not feeling this pain, not feeling this detachment from family, not feeling detached from reality, not feeling like I'm not a part of anything. So the destruction could have been, you know, anything. It could have been him working out over excessively. It could have been, you know, him running with high risk people. It doesn't necessarily mean that he was hurting himself, but if you input these things into your lifestyle, it eventually does lead to a self destructive lifestyle, if you understand what I mean. He really stayed secluded. Well, that's a given. Once you're in that lifestyle, seclusion does end up happening. The party ends a long time ago, and you end up being in your own little world, so to speak. Most people that I know, once their partying does kind of teeter out, it does become a very isolated, well, I'm going to stay home and get high, or I'm going to stay home and drink, or I'm going to get my friend to come over and we're going to do whatever we do. Isolated from the rest of the world, isolated from family, isolated from friends, isolated from anyone that doesn't live that same lifestyle as you. You're gonna you're gonna isolate yourself in your addiction because A, you don't want to be judged. B, you don't feel a part of. C, the only people that really get you, quote unquote, are the people that are doing things the same as you. So if you and I are smoking weed on the couch and somebody comes in and they're not a weed smoker, A, we're either going to not want them there because they're a buzzkill, or we're going to want to include them into our lifestyle based on our reality. We're going to try to change this reality that is unknown to match our own because, as we've always said, misery loves company. So if they don't smoke or they don't want to smoke, make sure that we get rid of them because they're a buzzkill. We're in our own little world and we're having a good time. And here comes somebody that's not laughing with us. They're not getting our jokes. They're sitting there just looking at us like we have three heads. I mean, it just a buzzkill. So, isolation and seclusion go hand in hand. The next one says marijuana, heroin, central nervous system depressants. And when your central nervous system is depressed by marijuana, heroin, opiates, or alcohol, what ends up happening is it takes you a lot longer to get up and going when your central nervous system is constantly suppressed. It would be like having these lights that are shining so bright on me right now. If I let them burn 24/7 like this, and then all of a sudden I started flipping them off, flipping them on, flipping them off, flipping them on. It would take longer eventually because I'd be burning out the connections between the switch and the light. And that's what happened with an individual who is using marijuana, heroin, opiates, or even alcohol. It takes a lot longer. It burns out the brain neurotransmitters and things like that. I feel he was looking for validation, and that's why he fell into that crowd. It's a given, just like what I'm saying. Validation is a huge motivator for you to run with some sort of crowd. And this is stating that this was before he headed to DeSales, before he headed to the other college, and before he headed to WSU. Because he wasn't exhibiting these behaviors then that we know of. So therefore, these were early on in his life. That's what I've done. It says sort of creep people out. There was no examples with that. You know, we talked about the creepy word, we talked about the creeper, we talked about that wording in itself. I'm behind the camera right now. I don't know what I could do to really creep you out. But if we're side by side, there would be some obvious signs that would give people a bad vibe. It's so sad that this word creep or creeped out is such watered down that anything can give people a creepy vibe. You know what I mean? What I would take this as meaning is if I was sitting there on the couch with you and you were a female and I wasn't saying very much, but I was just sitting there looking at you. You look back at me, you say something, I answer you with a very articulated, formal answer, or I'm just staring at you and really have no interaction with you. Or if I'm in a restaurant and I'm just making offhand remarks because I don't know how to socialize in social settings, because for whatever reason, if he does have the ASD, it would imply that his reading of social cues would not be as understanding as you and I. Like, you know, we're in a quiet library and you're not able to read the room and you come in laughing and joking, you're talking loud. The first thing the librarian's going to do is shh. We learned that from a very early age. We really do. But an individual that doesn't read social cues totally is off the mark. It's kind of like his tap talk early on. He said he felt like a sack of meat. He felt like a loser of a man. I mean, to have that kind of feeling about yourself, not only because you're an addict, but because you are letting people down, you're letting yourself down, and you can't seem to feel a reality that makes you happy. So you grow up, and then everywhere you go, people are saying you're socially awkward, you're a creep, you just give me the weird vibes. Well, how many guys or gals, because there's women as well, would you say that have this capacity to kind of creep you out just a little bit? I'm sure there's quite a few, and I'm sure that as we're sitting here talking, you can even name some. You get what I'm saying? It's like you can name some that give you that creepy vibe. They might not be killer, they might not be antisocial or anything like that, but they're always just a little off, you know? So I might come back to that. His food regimen was very, very weird and went above and beyond being vegan. Vegan. I don't really see this as a problem other than the fact that he could possibly be trading one for the other. Because, once you've been addicted to chemicals, once you've been addicted to chemicals, you're very easily influenced on getting attached to anything and everything that changes the way you feel. So if you all of a sudden develop this understanding for a different lifestyle change, such as food, you know, there's nothing wrong with having a strict food regimen. I mean, I wouldn't see that as a red flag. I wouldn't see that as something that would be so outlandish that would make him so different than many people that you know in that lifestyle. As far as him wearing gloves and, supposedly stating he wasn't going to eat anything out of a pan that touched meat or something like that, that's never been um, collaborated. So I don't know about that aspect. But as far as his diet, I wouldn't see anything wrong with that. Behavioral problems and a sexist attitude towards women. Um, Having a sexist attitude toward women, I could identify with that because I am a man. I've always been a man. I've never been a woman. Okay. So early on in my addiction, I did objectify many women in my life. They were disposable objects. They weren't seen as potential love objects. They weren't seen as relationship objects. They were disposable objects because I didn't want to get attached to anything that I couldn't make sure that I wasn't going to hurt them or they were going to hurt me. So I kept it disposable, even though I gave the presentation that I could possibly be wanting more, even though I'd be with this one thinking about this one, if that makes sense. Just like an addict does. The more the merrier. One's okay, but 50's not enough. So to say he had a sexist attitude toward women, that would say that he kind of talked down or maybe gave a very authoritarian, authoritative demeanor toward the women in his life, whoever that might have been. Behavioral problems were probably attributed to him getting a WSU very early on and having the issues he did with his professors. Um, the complaint that he might have had from the female students and possibly the male students as well. So, the sexist attitude towards females he interacted with at the school. Did he like one or move? What that say? Did he like one and or more of them and they found him uninteresting and he retaliated by grading harshly? You know, I wish I could read my own writing sometimes. It's even typed and I can't articulate the sentence. But basically, what I meant right there is did he have a crush on any of his students, one or more, and they seemed uninterested? So he graded them harshly and punished them into showing them exactly who was boss, if that makes sense. Um, I'm the TA, you're the student. I'm gonna show you I'm boss. Feisty, belligerent. See, these words are not very flattering. And then we get to the highlights of Brian Koberger growing up. Interested in psychology as a teen. He was interested in how people thought. Well, that's an interest for a lot of people. It doesn't make you a killer, but when you're doing it for the wrong reasons and you're doing it to maintain a level of control over someone, that's when it becomes unhealthy. When you're interested in how people think and you're looking to analyze the situation and get one step ahead of people before they get you, then that's a very survivalistic instinct. And I would say that being interested in how people thought would give someone who's not very comfortable with his own emotions a way to attach to that, even if you don't know what that feels like. It's kind of like people who are more interested in the feeling of being in love than actually understanding what it is to be in love. There are people that we have in our society that are more interested in the feeling of being in love rather than actually attaching to somebody, building a bond, falling in love, and living happily ever after, so to speak. So, um, interested in how people thought, some of the questions for individuals that think that or therapists is, so how's it going today? Or how have you been? Any negative thoughts going on lately? Any kind of high risk behavior, thinking patterns, anything like that? So if I came at you and I asked you straight out the straight out the box, if I said, so how are you feeling today? What's going on? Never really ever interacted with you, and I just came out and asked that. Most people are going to be taken back by that a little bit. They're not going to want to feel open all of a sudden. They're going to close down. So, if he had this kind of dysfunction where he was trying to portray an image that he saw other people do, but he wasn't very good at reenacting it, and therefore he would have came across as socially awkward. Emotions and psychological traits influence decision making when committing a crime. Okay, so cut and dry. It said your emotions and your psychological traits influence your decision making when you're committing a crime. So if you're not emotionally attached to it, that means that you can go in, kill four people, and not think twice. Wipe off your knife, sit on a chair, catch your breath, and walk out like nothing ever happened. You get what I'm saying? Because your emotion and your decision making is turned off. It's like somebody with no conscience whatsoever. You're able to just methodically go in and do this and not give it a second thought. Did he do this? Time will tell. But I'm telling you, if he had that capacity to turn off everything, they have that non feeling factor emotionally, you turn your heart off and you turn your brain off, and you're able to do just about anything you want. Urge plus fantasy plus opportunity equals results. So, you know, I take this back to my years of playing football. There was a time when I could say, no pain, no pain. I would talk myself mind over matter. Feel no pain, because I would be having these certain issues at home where I would feel a lot of pain and I was unable to not feel that. So on the football field, I learned how to talk myself through certain things that would make me hurt, where I could just run right through somebody and not feel a thing because of the mentality that I put myself in. So what I incorporate that with what I'm saying right now is, if you're able to talk yourself through this, you're able to turn those emotions off. You're able to turn that decision making and going from the thinking brain to the survivalistic brain, which you become very animalistic, and it's just to hunt and prey and destroy. And that's how it goes. That quick. So interested in serial killers and developing theories on what happened at crime scenes based on photos presented in class. Would he have photos of crime scenes in his phone? I wrote this a long time ago. I didn't just write this when the Dateline thing came out. I wrote this, and these are my words. So, what I'm saying is something that I theorized on this person that we're talking about. Um, could he have possibly had an infatuation with bloody crime scenes? And I did a video on this at one point. Didn't get a lot of views, but it's still in my library if you want to go check it out. One thing about my channel is you have to understand there's more breakdown of criminal activity and breakdown of the mental capacity versus some of these other channels that, do other things. So, you know, there's been live that I do that don't get a lot of views based on the subject matter. But if you really come in to listen, you'll understand more about true crime than just listening to a lot of people regurgitate their thoughts and emotions on a case that they have real no understanding of what's going on psychologically with the person. You know, so could he have had photos in his phone of various situational events that we've heard about lately in the Dateline episode? We heard that he did have pictures of women in his phone. We learned that he took selfies. We learned that he supposedly searched certain types of pornography sites. Did he have any kind of downloaded photos of individuals either tied up, self harm? Did he have any of this type of stuff that was warping his mental capacity from this fantasy that he was creating versus the reality of what real life is? Because, like I've said before, and I said it last night, whatever you incorporate your life into, There's nothing wrong with being a criminal justice major. There's nothing wrong with being a police officer. There's nothing wrong with being a lawyer, a doctor, any of this stuff. But the moment that you become so intertwined and allow the darkened portion of that reality in which you live every day, you're going to contort it to be an evil portion of your life. Like if you constantly think about serial killers and murderers and all this other stuff, how are you ever going to be on the other side if you're so fixated on the murderer rather than the victim? So I just have to put that out there because, there's a lot of individuals that are pro killer versus the victim. It's because they're more fixated on the possibility of being able to kill somebody rather than being somebody's victim. And that's just the blatant point of it. Because if you ask people, if you were to take a poll, if you could kill somebody and get away with it, would you do it? Maybe not decades ago, people would have answered honestly, but I believe this day and age where we're at, I believe a lot of people would say yes. I believe that if we had a purge night, people would have a list. And, that kind of goes with this. So if you're a criminal justice major and you're pumping all this stuff through you and you're learning about it and you want to do good, like I said, with the trauma bond, you start off by wanting to be good. You want to do good. You want to be a helper. He helped somebody that was choking, I think, early on, and he was part of the whatever that ROTC or whatever that I don't know where that picture was where you're doing the push-ups. He was on the right path. So in the trauma bond, you have the perpetrator on top, you have the rescuer on one side, and you have the victim over here. So at the top is the perpetrator. At that point, I was saying that he was a rescuer. He was a people pleaser because he wanted to do good. But something happened between that, where he started victimizing not only himself, but he started victimizing other people, as what I've read earlier. And in doing so, he shifted from the rescuer up the side toward the perpetrator. And he started making people his victims, either emotionally, physically, and he was on top. And he may have gotten off on the power and control that he never had while he was getting bullied by all these people. So what happens is over time you say, well, I don't want to be good. You start incorporating a different mindset, a different life where to the average normal world, you put on your clothes, you put on your shoes, you put on, you throw on your backpack, you go to college, you go to your class, you teach, you play that role. While in your mind, you're secretly indulging in these fantasies because you're enjoying the perpetrator role. And what happens to people who don't have the capacity to get help for that is some of them do end up hurting people very badly. What I believe is he was, while he was sober, he was about being the good person. I believe that he could have relapsed very briefly, and that could have been a precipitating factor on what made him feel that he was falling back down into that proverbial abyss where he said, you know what, I don't want to victimize myself anymore. Let me gain power by gaining control over other people. If I'm the smartest person in the room, if I'm the the runner, if I'm the, whatever, then people are not going to devalue me and make me their victim. Does that make sense at all, chat? I hope all this that I'm talking about is simplified enough that it's making sense. I know that it's very um, cerebral, but in order to learn about somebody psychologically, you have to dig in like this. It's not the most interesting live, I understand that, but hopefully people will want to learn about this stuff. You know, it says April 2022, Koberger interviewed for a job as a graduate research assistant at a Pullman, Washington police department and did awkwardness prevent his hiring. So, a graduate research assistant, he never interviewed as a police to be a police officer. He never interviewed to be a forensic cloud specialist. None of that. He interviewed to be a research assistant to research data. That was it. People have made him astronomically more qualified for what he interviewed for than he actually was. You know, also the fact that he did not get this position and the person that did was a female could have been one more punch in the gut to somebody who doesn't want to feel like your victim. So here you are, you're riding high, you're interviewing for this, you're a TA, you moved across the country, you're sober, you're trying to build a new life, and you interview, and here's the first gut punch. You didn't get the job. In your mind, you had all this stuff already planned out. You were telling people, you were talking to people about it, and it didn't happen. But you kept going, right? So you kept running, you kept hiking, you're trying to get a life outside of the academic portion, which had become your identity. And that's what I want you to know is his identity was the addiction. It was the addict at one point. Once he sobered up, it became the academic student. Now his identity is the TA student, the proverbial PhD student. He was always observing and watching. Well, we do that. Many of us do that. This part says, then starting November and December, he started just handing out 100s and leaving very minimal comments. What made him start handing out hundreds and leaving minimal comments? Where before he was such a hard ass, according to his students, that he nitpicked and wanted you to be on the same level as he was, and he would grade you so harshly. But all of a sudden, in November and December, he started handing out hundreds with very minimal comments. Could this been the completion of the stress leaving him? Because if you're following along with this, there's a buildup. It's called the emotional barometer that each of us has. And we use three basic instincts to deal with this on a daily basis. We have social, sexual, and security. But we burn those three areas out. Those are the three most basic instincts we possess as human beings. So every time a little pressure builds up, we pick from one of these three. It brings the emotional barometer down. Well, what happens is we burn these out, and the emotional barometer just climbs and climbs and climbs until we become mentally obsessed on how to relieve that pressure. And most of us use a drink or a drug, or sometimes other avenues to give you a sense of pleasure so that you can relieve that pressure and that pressure goes down. When his situation, I'm sure he started dabbling a little bit with chemicals. I'd be almost certain something. He was drinking, he was smoking weed, something was bringing that emotional barometer down. And he could have been fantasizing over a relationship that he was having with one of the people he was stalking if he was doing so. One of the people he was surveying around the campus, maybe one of the people he had in his phone. He was infatuated with the thought of this could be mine. Or in a dysfunctional mindset, this is mine. She just doesn't know it yet. He seemed really nervous, the source said. He was narrating to himself everything that was happening when he got arrested. At one point, he was saying something to himself like, I'm fine, this is okay. Like he was reassuring himself that this whole thing wasn't awful. Just like what I told you a while ago, mind over matter. You're talking yourself through it. So therefore, you're not overreacting. So in his mind, he's saying, it's okay. You're all right. There's nothing wrong. It's going to be all right. Don't worry about it. You're fine. And he stayed calm when he was arrested. The defendant claims he went to hike and run and or to see the moon and the stars. Is there a history of this? Did he do this in Pennsylvania? That's one thing that I hope does come out at trial. Is did he have a long history of this? And it just didn't begin when he got the Pullman. Because if it just began when he got the Pullman, then he doesn't have a history of it. This was a new hobby. Retrieved the school AED as fellow staffers and emergency personnel attended to their coworker. And that's what I was telling you about a while ago, how he was still in the rescue mode. And then he went to rehab, got cleaned up, and some described him as bright, focused, and nearly obsessive about criminology. Because criminology gave him an identity. It gave him an understanding, something to follow, something to be a part of. So anytime you're feeling stressed out, anytime you're feeling overwhelmed, let me turn on true crime. It's going to soothe me, going to calm me down. I'm going to try to break the case before they do in the end of the hour. I don't do that, but if he was obsessed with it, I would see him watching cases and trying to figure them out before they were ever figured out. These are some of the names that have been associated with him: sociopath, lack of empathy, they may not care about or understand other people's feelings, irregard for right and wrong. They may not understand the difference between right and wrong, and they may ignore the right to feeling their others. They have a sense of manipulation. They may take advantage of others for their own personal gain. They're impulsive. They may act impulsively or fail to plan ahead. They're aggressive. They may be irritable and aggressive and may get into fights or physically assault others. They're irresponsible. They may fail to constantly work on honor financial obligations. Lack of remorse. They may not feel remorse for bad things they do because they're able to turn that off. A psychopath, their behavior that conflicts with the social norms. They disregard and violate the rights of others. They have an inability to distinguish between right and wrong. They have difficulty with showing remorse or empathy. They have a tendency to lie often. They manipulate and hurt others. Recurring problems with the law. You ever notice how many times this individual got pulled over by the police? That would be a problem with the law in my eyes. Whether he got a ticket, whether he didn't, he was constantly getting pulled over. Was that coincidental, or is he just a bad driver? General disregard toward safety and responsibility. Expressing anger and arrogance on a regular basis. Criminal record, stole the iPhone. Characteristics, white male with a height of feet, weight of 185 pounds. Photograph shows bushy eyebrows. The psychological assessment of the crime scene and the suspect's belongings. And I went over that already. Um, these are some things that I broke down that tend to be needed in order for a crime to be committed. There's accessibility. How easy it is to access their target is an important factor on deciding when or where to strike. The locks, the security system, the cameras, these are all things taken into consideration. From what we learned, the King Road house had none of these things. If they did, they weren't utilized at the time. So that, in my opinion, that makes this house an easy target. The accessibility, the vulnerability. In this regard, the suspect weighed whether or not the target will be easy to dominate and overpower. Will they be home alone or somewhere secluded where no one will see or hear them? If we're talking about a location, is there something about it, say a broken lock, that would give them an entrance to the premises? I would say that the vulnerability factor was that this house supposedly had all women in it. I'm sure he didn't know that Ethan was there. If he did, he probably didn't care. But all these women, if he was surveying them, were at least from 5 foot to 5'10". And the three of the victims were probably around 5'3" to 5'5". They were very little, very thin, very able to be vulnerable. Desirability. Something about the victim or location appears to the suspect or provides them with an opportunity to carry out a personal goal or a vendetta. Now, let's discuss what aspect of the crime scene might give clues as to who or what was the target. The number of victims. When law enforcement arrived, they found 4 victims and 2 survivors. 6 people were home at the time of the murders. Had there only been 1 or 2 victims, this might point to the attack being personal. 4 victims hint at the attack to being more of a rampage. So there's been a lot of people that suggest that this was a personal attack based on the overkill. But as that definition just said, it was more of a rampage killing than anything else because there was more than one victim. The location of the victims. Had all the victims been found in the same general vicinity, police might assume the crime was the result of a confrontation. In this case, the suspect made an intentional journey from one floor to the next and from one end of the house to the other. This is especially notable because the suspect had the ability to remain upstairs until the house was still and swiftly exited through the kitchen and out the sliding back door. I struggled with the idea he came down the stairs and ran into Xana. According to the PCA, Dylan heard someone say, "Someone's here," then got up, opened her door, and looked around but didn't see anyone. Hearing only a female's voice or activity upstairs would not indicate someone other than the roommates was inside the residence. Something else had to have occurred for someone to make such a statement. So that's basically saying that everybody's theory that the fighting from the frat guys came over to the house and there was 4 people killed in different locations. If that would have been the case, they all would have been killed probably in the living room or downstairs or even in the front yard. Where the crime occurred, it's not unusual for a killer to hunt for their victims before carrying out the assault. The hunting ground is usually a space that falls within the suspect's comfort zone. As we heard, he was there more than 23 times. That sounds pretty comfortable to me. Dare a couple of scenarios explain this. The DoorDash driver had arrived, rang the doorbell, and one of the roommates called downstairs or upstairs to let someone know there was someone at the door. Someone crept into Maddie's room and startled Kaylee or Maddie, called out for help. Someone passed or went into the kitchen and noticed the slider door was open, or Murphy was barking. The PCA stated that while Dylan thought it was Kaylee she heard, it also could have been Xana saying someone was in the house, since the download of the phone confirmed she was active on TikTok at 4:12 a.m. My question is, in fact, if it was Xana who believed a stranger was in the house, she would have been just a few feet from Dylan's bedroom door. Why didn't Dylan see her? To me, that says Xana wasn't in or near the kitchen at the time and likely had made her way back to the bedroom. This speculation tells me that in time, with the killing being more of a rampage than targeting than just one victim. The state of the victims. Each was in the bedroom. We know two were in bed, presumably asleep. All we know about Ethan and Xana is that Xana was found on the floor and Ethan was also in the room. They were not found in position to suggest that there was a confrontation or that the suspect was provoked in some way. That is huge. That is huge right there. The lack of forced entry. James Fry said that the back slider door was open when they arrived on the scene. This date point could indicate the suspect had access to the home or was let in. Also consider that slider doors are alarmingly easy to lift off the track, and apparently there was no dowel in place securing the door. The suspect may not have needed to be let in. I don't believe he was let in. I believe he came in on his own regard. How are we doing, guys? Are y'all still with me here? Are y'all are y'all liking my presentation so far? Are y'all enjoying the show? If so, please hit the like button. Hit the subscribe if you're not a subscriber to the channel. We don't ask anything from you here. We don't ask for any money. We don't ask for any donations. We don't ask for anything but a like. And it doesn't cost you a thing. So, the brutality of the crime. We don't know much about the crime scene other than it was a great deal of blood. It tracks considering the number of victims. That can also be indicative of a frenzied attack. The offender will select victims that are consistent with the important characteristics of people who are important to the offender. The characteristics of murder. So, organized. An organized murder, the crime is planned to show self control of the crime scene, to leave few clues. The victim is a targeted stranger, attempt to control the victim. Likely characteristics of the offender, they have an above average IQ, socially and sexually competent, married or cohabitating, experiencing anger, depression at the time of the offense, follows media coverage of the crime, skilled occupation. So we do know that he was supposedly monitoring this on YouTube and searching his name. This is a disorganized murder. Little planning, preparation, little attempt to hide the evidence at the scene. Minimum use of constraint, random, disorganized behavior. To live alone, near the crime scene, sexually and socially inadequate. Their unskilled occupation or unemployed. Physically, sexually abused in childhood. Frightened and confused at the time of the attack. So I would say that this was more of an organized attack and murder than a disorganized. So this just kind of breaks it down a little more. And one fact that I left out here is that he ordered the K-bar knife on Amazon per Law and Crime, July 2023. And since we've also been pertinent to new information about um, him having other Amazon searches, this also entails somebody that was trying to cover his tracks, trying to be smarter than the police, and trying to not get caught, just like many people do when they commit a crime. Um, that's a good question. If that slider lock was broken, I wonder if the landlord was aware of it. That's a very good question. I'm going to open it up right now for questions from you guys that have been listening to this. Do you have any questions as to what I was kind of incorporating there? Um, and I'm also going to load a video that I did. I was going to do a little bit on the cyber stalking stuff, but I'm losing my steam. Um, Not because I don't want to do any more of this. It's been a long day. And unlike a lot of people, I do talk about this. Um, I talk about this nonstop at work. I think about it nonstop. Um, I'm problem solving. I'm doing all kinds of stuff. And after a while, your brain gets tired. I don't sit around and try to solve the crime. Um, Let me see where that one was. There it is. I'm going to play a little bit from last night or this early morning. I'm going to give my thoughts on this because I believe that I had some valuable insight on this. I hope you feel the same after I play this. Who is still in here? I can never read the number of people in here. I can never read it. Based on the chatters, it looks like there's only two people, but you just never know. Here we go. This would infringe on boundaries, control, and as he says, lack of empathy. Because if we're unable to see or articulate what other people are feeling, we don't know that we're infringing on their boundaries. We believe that, hey, I haven't done anything for you to feel creeped out. I haven't done anything for you to act like you're acting towards me. And that in turn would turn him into being defensive and possibly verbally escalating, if that makes sense at all. I like this statement right here by Michelle. She says, monsters can hide behind the mask of an angel. Even the devil was an angel at one time. You're very true. So, the next one says, two knives, a Glock handgun with three empty magazines, black face mask, black gloves, a black hat, green leafy substance in a plastic bag. A book with underlining on page 118 and the suspect AT&T bill. Could this have been a kill kit or the killer's extra gear? I'll leave that for your understanding. You can type that in the comments after the video is done, or you can type that in the chat. The warrant said that the documents were vehicle paperwork, books, a prescription, a cell phone, laptop, and power cable were also collected. So we have to wonder what was on that laptop. You get what I'm saying? What was on that laptop? Let me continue on with this. That way we can get to the next questions. I don't know if I even get to the next questions because we get caught up in some unrelated stuff that didn't even need to really be discussed at that point. The fact of the matter is, what I was trying to portray here, and I guess I didn't get any further than that. Um, but I do have the list, and I might do a live later on the remaining portions of that. Um, what I was trying to say is, we've later found out that he had pornographic searches. Nobody knew exactly what time frame this was, but the pornographic searches were about people potentially sleeping, being drugged. So these would exemplify that the individual would not have any resistance doing what they wanted to do, because if somebody was asleep, you would catch them off guard. If they were drugged, obviously you wouldn't have a fight on your hands. So drug can mean intoxicated or anything of that nature. Um, like I said earlier, with the trauma bond, he could have been bonded with his own trauma, and instead of being other people's victim, he would shuffle between a rescuer role and the perpetrator. It's kind of like when we heard about him saving a coworker's when they were supposedly choking or something, and he was able to do the Heimlich or something, that I remember something of that nature early on. That put him into rescuer mode, and at that point in his life, he was probably on the right path. So he was probably feeling good about himself, actually doing good, but also fighting the urges to rebel against that goodness because of the addictive process that changes your mindset over the years. And doing this as a job, and as all the schooling and training that I have regarding this, drugs and alcohol change your mindset. So at that point, even though he was doing well and he was trying to rescue, he was trying to keep himself out of a victim role. So he would no longer be bullied. He was trying to escape that past. And now he was trying to be, in essence, a people pleaser by helping, by being the rescuer, as that example stated. And then we found out that he had applied at WSU for a position. And as I stated earlier, there was a lot of instances where women in his life had victimized him. So when he didn't get the position, as we assume, to another woman, he lost that position. Therefore, in his mind, it could have been he was victimized yet again by another female. So instead of, I wish I had a dry erase board to show this, but imagine a triangle. At the very tip at the top is perpetrator. On both sides of the bottom two portions, one side is a rescuer, one side is the victim. So that would have taken him back to the victim role. So nobody likes to stay in that role very long because they're trying so hard to get out of that. And the perpetrator means that you cross that imaginary line between good and evil. If you have those urges to go that direction, but you feel that life has wronged you and that you don't have any sense of obligation towards yourself or others, which would be lack of empathy, you know, at that point you start creeping up that side to become a perpetrator of some sort, whether it be harassing women, whether it be overpowering and being controlling, whether it be getting angry very quickly. It doesn't necessarily have to be de escalation to be a killer, but it can. It can get to that point because at the top of the pinnacle, there is a lot of negative behaviors and a lot of built up frustration, angst, and like not Daniel, Carlos stated, when urge meets opportunity, then usually you have destruction. And it's very dangerous once you get to that point because you could be knowledgeable enough and proficient enough to tell yourself, I don't need to be doing this. But at that point, you're just going on unconscious, whatever it is that you've bottled up for so long. And I believe that that's exactly what happened to Mr. Koberger. I believe that he was trying to change due to his, addiction and everything that went along with it. He was trying to build a self esteem. He tried to do that by losing weight, getting the surgeries and everything else, and still being treated the same way. It must shatter your image because some people, let me give you this example. Let's say if you're heavier set and you've been heavy set for a long time and you decide, you know what, I'm tired of being heavy set. I'm tired of the jokes. I'm tired of the innuendos. I'm gonna go work out and start losing some weight. I'm gonna eat healthy, all this stuff. But you do it trying to please other people instead of doing it for yourself. So once you start losing the weight, once you start your body starts changing and morphing into the person who you feel other people are going to be accepting of, you still deal with the internal feelings of a bigger person. So it doesn't matter how fit you get. People are congratulating you, they're telling you good job, but on the inside you still see yourself as a bigger person in the mirror and you're never satisfied with it. So you do one or two things. You become very obsessive until you become very sickly looking and you're no longer fit, or you just give up and start gaining the weight back because it's a self fulfilling prophecy. So at those points, I believe that when Brian lost that weight and got the surgeries, he was on a mission to maintain. He was on a mission for change. Like I said, he was on the riskier side of the trauma bond and he was content with being there. And he was probably there all through his studies. I believe that he may have fluctuated between rescuer and perpetrator at times, but not all the way up the pinnacle. I believe that he didn't allow other people to victimize him at that point. He was always the one in control, the smartest person in the room. So by the time he went to WSU, this is a very lonely life if you're doing it without an attachment to society or even to yourself or to your self image. The only thing you see is a past failure working toward change. So we get to WSU. He starts having problems with his professors. He starts having problems with his students. He starts visualizing the life that he's trying to help these people learn. And they're just basically slapping him in the face. In his mind, I was very highly acclaimed coming here. I got an acclamation from a professor. I was one of the highest persons in the class mentally, blah, blah, blah. I come over here and I come crashing down, and these people are slowly inching me toward the victim role again because they're victimizing me, trying to say he's grading us harshly. He's not fair towards women. The professor, his boss or whatever, was critiquing his work, making him do an improvement plan, all these things, and plus trying to maintain a social life. And as we found out, the only person that he really socialized with was one of his coworkers. So he's still trying to formulate a life for himself at WSU while trying to maintain the helpful person. Well, that helpful person started getting resentment, started getting anger built up, started getting an unrealistic version of themselves. The urge to act out, the fire was building. And then the pool party. We don't know if he met one of the victims there. We don't know if he saw one of them there. We don't know if he met somebody that knew one of the victims. But somehow or another, I believe that that pool party introduced him to 1122 King Road. There could have even been a party there that night. Somebody could have invited him from the pool party to 1122. He followed them over there, and instantly, bam, he runs into either all or maybe one or two of the victims. And instantly, he becomes the perp, which is feeding the inner demons of not only him talking about serial killers, listening about serial killers, fantasizing about serial killers, and having his own delusional thoughts interject into his reality. And it was morphing into something that was gaining more control over him than he was able to control. And like I said, once urge meets opportunity, the fantasy is enacted. So I believe once he became fixated on that residence, that's that explains the 23 times because it is an obsession. You are being driven by an obsession. And if you've ever been addicted to anything, it's the pleasure. You could be laying in bed and you wake up long enough to remember something that gave you pleasure, such as somebody's face. Somebody could be posting something. You're instantly smitten by something that you're viewing, and it becomes an obsession. I got to get over there to view what's going on. I wonder if I can see in her room. The voyeuristic, the the peeping tom, that aspect. So the 23 times. I don't believe that he was planning to murder them at that point, but something was ticking inside him. If he is the one, tick, 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 tick. Unstable, fantasy driven, past and present failures, and a loss of control and sanity ultimately could have led to what ended up happening. And you could go without sleep and become very delusional, very, very withdrawn from reality because the serotonin's not being uptaked. And if you're using drugs in the process, it even messes it with it even worse. So he could have been in a hyper stimulated state of mind all the time. And it isn't until the arrest that he came down, detoxed a little bit, and then became understanding of exactly where his life had gone and the time he had lost during the anticipation of just becoming successful and how he let his urges become his destiny. I hope you enjoyed this tonight. I'm going to try to get some sleep. All right. I hope y'all enjoyed that. Hold on. We're not done yet. I want to show you something else. I'm in the teaching mood today, am I not? Um, this is what I was telling you about earlier. Let me see if I can make it bigger. Can y'all see that? This is the trauma bond that I was telling you about earlier regarding the they call it the persecutor here, but it's the perpetrator, the rescuer, and the victim. And this is what I was talking to you about, Mr. Koberger. If he was in this traumatic bond with anything in his life due to not being able to feel it, understand it, or emotionally compartmentalize it, then it's almost like playing a role. As you can see, the persecutor in this mode, the person doesn't value other people's views and integrity. They're angry. God, I can't read that. I need to get my glasses. Says they're angry, open, and passively. They're aggressive, judgmental, bullying, demanding, spiteful, and scornful. The rescuer in this mode, the person doesn't value other people's capacity to help themselves. They're pure self sacrificing, over helpful, and facilitative. They like to be needed. They're prone to needing meting unnecessarily, and they're engulfing. In the victim in this mode, the person doesn't value self and others and defers to others. They're manipulative, they're poor me syndrome, helpless and needy, complaining and whining. They're fearful, they're downtrodden, and they blame others. The one thing about this drama or this trauma bond is you can be in any of these areas at any time. They're intertwined and they're shifting throughout your life. I believe that Brian was in the perpetrator or the persecutor role when he committed these crimes. I believe that while he was sober growing up, he was the rescuer. And he possibly sobered up again going through college. And he was in this role until things started falling from grace, so to speak. And that probably took him into the victim role, where nobody liked to be a victim. But if you've ever been a drug addict or you ever have life kick you down and you feel like not a part of, and that you're just free falling, what's the only way you can become strong again? Exerting your control over others when you can't have that control over yourself. It's like people that don't have any kind of sense of control. Let's say that, I've worked with battered women that at home they had no say, they had no voice, they had no kind of identity. But once they were at work, they were very hateful and very demanding and very overbearing, and they were never wrong. They were presenting everything that they encountered at their house that they could not overcome. They didn't have the strength to. So the same thing happens in this trauma bond with post traumatic stress disorder is all this stuff, and then you put in there some dissociative traits. It also leads to a very deadly combination. But most of the time, you don't know that you're in this cycle. You don't know because your life is shifting so quickly, as most of our lives do. But your life is shifting so quickly, it's so interchangeable, so the inability to grasp a reality that you're comfortable with. Like I've told you time and time again tonight, his identity was his studies. His identity used to be his addiction. The only way that he could feel in his life that he had purpose. Because we never hear about Brian being the overachiever in school. We never hear about him being an athlete. We never hear about any of that stuff. We only hear about Brian being able to start to break through once he gets out of treatment. So, I want you to take a look at this because this is very essential, not only in this case, but in other worldly events. You might not even understand that this happens in your own daily life. Um, so, let me know in the chat overall how you think I did. Did you get a lot out of it tonight? Did you learn a little bit? Did you see the understanding of the breakdown, the deception of a killer? And that's why I called it the deception, is because you deceive so many people that they would say, oh, he could never be a killer. He could never do this. He could never do that. We're all capable, and we all have that capability to be in this trauma bond at any point in our life. They call this the Stockholm syndrome. So, if you're struggling with any of this stuff, get it checked out before it's too late. See if you can get some help, because all it takes is one really bad domestic violence situation or one snapping moment, and you go from being the victim to a perpetrator. Next thing you know, you could be facing murder charges or worse. I wish there was more tonight. I'm almost at an hour and a half, but I will go back over to Trauma Bond next time I'm on about this case. If you're in the neighborhood, be let me stop sharing this. If you're in the neighborhood, did y'all hear anything that I said? I wasn't even on the stage. Did y'all hear anything I said about the Trauma Bond? Okay, that's good. I was all freaked out about it. Like I wasn't even on the stage. Um, I'm always paranoid that I don't know how people do that when they're talking off the stage and they're just showing something. Um, like I wanted to say, if you're in the neighborhood, let me show you the upcoming stuff. How do you like my new page setup? Been working hard to make it more professional looking. If you're in the neighborhood, I will be presenting the Mickey Stein's murder case breakdown tomorrow at 8 o'clock. And then on Tuesday, I will be continuing to discuss this case. I'm going to take a turn and start doing this case a little more because it's more engaging right now. But I do want to show you something that, let me get to, I want to put this on my video just in case it gets deleted. I said, well, no green there, Kermit, and let the car bled the green away as I got into the color. This was my attempt at lightening up not only the lights, but as you can see, this is a white vehicle. It is not green. There's green tint around it, but many people are still fixated on these white pumpkins. They're like, you mess with it. There's white pumpkins. That's still not a white car. It's green. Or those pumpkins would be orange. Give me a break. And I also got this new kind of I'm going to be posting this whenever I go live, and I kind of was messing around today. And hopefully I have Mr. Khan back, because I did do a shout out for him and I thought this was really awesome. Let me find it. If you haven't checked out any of these shorts, you might go check them out because they're pretty awesome. There's Jennifer Coffinduffer.
Services for Crime Stoppers of Houston, and I wholeheartedly support House Bill 2000. I want to thank Representative Jones for her comments just now. They were very touching and they hit home with not just us here, but I'm sure everyone is watching this as well. When I first began talking with the family after I discovered what happened with her, and I discovered this little quirky loophole in the law, I told them Audrey Cunningham is going to be a catalyst for change. And that brings us here. Child grooming involves establishing an emotional connection with a child to lower their inhibitions for the purpose of sexual exploitation. Grooming is often a precursor to more severe forms of abuse, and recognizing it as a reportable offense underscores the seriousness of the crime. To put it bluntly, if McDougal had committed a crime today, he would have been charged with grooming. But he wouldn't have to register as a sex offender. That's what Audrey's bill takes care of, removes that glitch. So like Representative Jones says, I can't imagine, I get asked all the time, well, what do you think, is this bill gonna, pass? I usually say I'm cautiously optimistic, but frankly, this should be about as a slam dunk as you can get. So let's get this bill out of committee, get it to the floor, get it out of Senate, get it to the governor's desk in memory of Audrey Cunningham. I, like most people here, am sick and tired of naming bills after dead kids. But that's the reality that we have here. So let's honor Audrey Cunningham so that her legacy will last for eternity. And the goal is to prevent more Audrey Cunninghams. This will give parents a tool. And as you heard from here today, if they had known about his past history, which involved a sexually related offense, more than likely they would have not taken him in to be around an 11-year-old girl. This will prevent future Audrey Cunningham. So I want to thank Representative Ashby for his sponsorship and his willingness and eagerness to take this apart. So let's send a message out to the people of Texas, parents of Texas, that we care deeply about our children, and let's pass Audrey's law. Thank you.
And that's the awesome people that I have on my panel.
And
Here's another one.
Hitler. And essentially, we're redoing these hearings, and some now because Hitler is opening it up. In fact, the one thing I really like is Hitler just said, I'm going to let you see the genetic genealogy transcript, and there's other information he's going to disclose. I want to make it clear because I definitely wasn't clear on my tweet. He's not. One thing that we were able to find out about, which we always knew, except for one part of it, was the medical background and history regarding Brian Koberger. We all knew that would be in the possession, but we know about his family, that they have his family's background medical records. And I thought that was interesting. I really do. And it's not that we're going to see that now, but the point is, we know it's out there, and because he opened up that, he unsealed that so we could see that. And then we could be seeing that in trial. We could be seeing that at the sentencing stage, some of that medical history information coming out on Brian Koberger. And I find that fascinating. I think it's going to be very interesting, but I wanted to make it clear that it's going to be later on.
Right. Well, thank you. Here's another question or statement. 12 Gage, I want to know, Jennifer, if she could, would she do it all over again? Like if you were to start your journey of being an FBI agent, would you do it all over again? And what would you change?
I 100% would do it all over again. I feel like, I feel so blessed and I feel so lucky. You have to have a lot of luck, I think, or blessings from God. I'm a spiritual person. I've just been so lucky. All the things. Do I have any regrets? I might have one regret, but that's about it. I just feel like the whole career went pretty much perfect.
And those are the type of guests that, if you've never been to the channel, hopefully there'll be more of them. I'm starting to build a small portfolio of high-ranking types of individuals that come to the show and share their expertise with us, not just to talk about the Idaho 4 case, but to talk about other cases regarding different states, different avenues of types of situations, such as Andy's um, a part of Crime Stoppers as well, and it just very high level people. And hopefully tomorrow night I will have an individual as well that can share a story. I'm still waiting to hear back, but this is the type of the direction that I want my channel to grow. I don't want it just to be based on Idaho 4 because that case is going to be gone eventually. And I want to keep going and giving y'all the updated information as I get it and as I learn it, you know? You're right, Mountain Mama. And hi, Melissa D. How are you doing? She says, I think we all have at least one regret work wise. I really like her and enjoy listening to her. She's very approachable and she's a good interviewee. And hopefully she'll be on the channel again soon. She's a very busy person. They're very busy with all kinds of stuff that they do. She does have her own channel. So you might go over there and sub and show her some love, you know? So I'm trying to see if Andy has a channel. If he does, I will be posting his channel on the next situation that I put out. Y'all be mindful of the shorts because I do put a lot of those out daily when I can't put a video out. Um, true crime is not just watching a video and talking about it, but it's actually diving in and teaching people exactly what the process is, not only the criminal aspect, but also the judicial, and the levels of government that we have. So I hope that you enjoy this. And as I always say, Maestro, cue that music. I will see y'all again tomorrow night, hopefully, at 8 o'clock p.m. Be there or be square.